Welcome to the Health Headliner podcast by Tudu Digital. Our content is informational only and not medical advice. Please consult your provider. Now, let's dive into today's headlines.
Imagine a life where that connection between your brain and your body, something, we all just take for granted, is suddenly broken, completely severed. We're talking about spinal cord injury, and this isn't like cutting your arm where it just heals up. Researcher Maria Asplund put it very starkly. She said, unlike a skin wound, which typically heals on its own, the spinal cord does not regenerate effectively, making these injuries devastating and currently incurable, unquote. And for about 15 million people around the world, that's the reality according to the World Health Organization. It means loss of feeling, loss of function, often paralysis. It's a situation that honestly hasn't offered much real hope for recovery, until maybe now.
Exactly. And that's why what we're going to get into today is, well, it's potentially huge. We're seeing this groundbreaking development coming out of Sweden from Chalmers University of Technology, working with the University of Auckland in New Zealand. They've developed a kind of bioelectric implant. It's really thin. And in studies with rats, it's shown this incredible ability to restore movement, even sensation, after major spinal cord damage. And it does this using electric currents, but very precisely controlled ones.
Okay, let's unpack this because that sounds amazing. Our mission for this deep dive is to really get into this pivotal new study. We want to explore, why they did it, how they did it. The methodology sounds fascinating, and some of the findings, which were apparently quite surprising, maybe challenging what we thought we knew about healing. We'll also look at the bigger picture, what this could actually mean, the limitations, of course, and the potential future for treating spinal cord injuries in people. So yeah, we're going to blend the science paper details with a sort of broader health news angle. Okay, let's start with the basic science. Because it's not just about, shocking the area back to life, right? This research seems to tap into something fundamental, something our bodies kind of already do.
That's right. You see, naturally occurring electric fields, they're actually crucial when our nervous system first develops. They help guide nerve fibers to grow in the right direction. So this research is essentially trying to harness that same electrical guidance system, but, after an injury in an adult.
Wow. Okay. So how do they do that? You mentioned this implant.
Yes. They developed this ultra-thin implant, and it's designed to sit right on the spinal cord, specifically over the injured spot in the rats they studied. This direct contact, being right there on the damaged tissue, that's really a key part of this, getting the treatment exactly where it's needed.
And the goal then, as Professor Darren Svirsky's from Auckland put it, is to send a carefully controlled electrical current across that injury.
Exactly. To stimulate healing so people can recover functions lost. So it's targeted, it's intelligent, it's almost like giving the body precise instructions.
Instructions using electricity. How do they make sure that's safe and effective? The materials must be pretty special.
Oh, absolutely. They're using advanced electrode materials. They're called pseudocapacitive iridium oxide film electrodes, or SIRO electrodes. It's a bit of a mouthful, but the point is they allow for really powerful, precise stimulation, and critically, they're biocompatible. So they work with the body, they don't create toxic stuff, they don't cause inflammation, which, has been a big problem with older technologies. And the actual treatment, it was a very specific low-level current. 2 hertz biphasic pulses, 5 microamperes, 250 millisecond pulse width, applied for just 1 hour each day.
Okay, and here's something I found really interesting where they put the implant. You said on the spinal cord, but specifically subdurally.
Yeah.
Under the duramater.
Yes, exactly. Beneath that tough outer membrane, the duramater.
And that's different from older methods that might go epidurally, outside that membrane. Why is going underneath such a big deal?
Well, it's a game changer for efficiency and precision. When you place it subdurally, you get much stronger stimulation right in the spinal cord tissue. And maybe counterintuitively, you can do it with much less power.
Less power for stronger stimulation. How does that work?
Because you're bypassing the dura itself and the cerebrospinal fluid around the cord, those can kind of scatter or dissipate the electrical current if you stimulate from the outside, epidurally. Going subdural is like, well, imagine trying to shine a light through frosted glass versus shining it directly onto the surface you want to see. Being right there makes a huge difference.
That makes total sense. Okay, so they've got this clever implant placed subdurally. What did they actually find when they tested it on the rat? How was the experiment set up?
Right, so they used rats that had a specific injury, a thoracic contusion spinal cord injury, basically a controlled bruise to the mid-back part of the spinal cord, made with a specific force, 175 kilodines. They had 3 groups. One got the implant and the daily treatment. Another group was a control group. They had the injury but no treatment. And then a third group had no injury at all, just for comparison. The treated group got that 1 hour of electrical stimulation every day for 62 days over a period of 12 weeks, so 84 days total.
12 weeks. And mobility, how did they measure that and what happened?
They use a standard scale, the Basso-Beatty-Bresnahan Locomotor Rating Scale. It goes from 0, complete paralysis, up to 21, which is normal movement. And the results were, well, fascinating. In the very first week, the treated rats actually recovered a tiny bit slower.
Slower. Why would that be?
They think it might just be the physical presence of the stimulator, maybe a slight mechanical effect initially. But from week 4 onwards, the treated rats consistently showed significantly higher scores on that scale. Their hind limb function recovered much better.
And by the end, after the full 12 weeks.
The difference was really striking. By week 12, 100% every single rat in the treated group scored 14 or higher. That score indicates consistent coordination, weight support, things like that. Compare that to the untreated group, where only 20% reached that level. Most were still showing, significant issues with coordination, dragging their paws, things like that. So a really clear benefit.
Wow, okay. 100% versus 20% is huge. But spinal cord injury isn't just about movement, right? Sensation is critical too. Did they look at that?
They did. They used something called the electronic von Frey task. It basically measures mechanical sensitivity, how much force on the paw it takes before the rat withdraws it. It's a measure of touch sensitivity.
And what did that show?
Similar compelling results. The treated rats pulled their paws back quicker, meaning they were more sensitive starting right from week 1 and then consistently from week 3 all the way through week 12 compared to the untreated group. So it indicates a recovery of touch sensation. Interestingly, sometimes the treated rats actually withdrew their paws even faster than the uninjured control rats.
Faster than normal. What does that mean?
The researchers suggested it might indicate a degree of hypersensitivity developing, almost like the nerves were becoming a bit over-responsive. That's something they'd need to explore further, obviously.
Okay, and the big question with any implant safety, was it safe? Did it cause any problems itself?
That's a crucial finding. The analysis showed the treatment did not cause inflammation or any other damage to the spinal cord tissue. That's really important. It shows the implant and the stimulation were well-tolerated, biocompatible, a major hurdle cleared.
All right, this brings us to something you mentioned earlier, the surprising part. Great recovery in movement, good recovery in sensation. It's safe. But what about the nerves themselves? Did they see the nerve fibers, the axons, actually regrowing across the injury?
And this is where it gets really interesting and maybe complicates the picture a bit. They looked at specific markers for axon density and regeneration, things like beta-tubulin III and growth-associated protein 43 around the injury site after the 12 weeks. And they did not find significant differences between the treated and untreated groups for these markers.
Wait, so function improves significantly, but they couldn't see clear evidence that the main nerve pathways had regrown.
Exactly, which really raises the question.
Yeah.
If it's not straightforward axon regeneration, then what is the electrical field doing? How is it helping restore function?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? What are the theories?
Well, researchers are exploring other possibilities now. One idea is neuroprotective effects. Maybe the electric field helps protect the surviving nerve cells near the injury from further damage or death. Or perhaps it works through what they call alternative mechanisms. Maybe it encourages the body's own stem cells, these endogenous neural precursor cells, to survive better or turn into helpful cell types. Another thought is it might reduce the formation of glial scar tissue, which can physically block nerve growth, reduce those reactive astrocytes. So the exact how is still a bit of a puzzle, but the fact that it improves function seems pretty clear from this study.
Okay, so even if the mechanism isn't fully pinned down, the potential here feels enormous. It offers, well, genuine hope for people with these devastating injuries. The goal, as Professor Aspland mentioned, is ultimately to transform this technology into a medical device.
Absolutely. And thinking further ahead, this kind of low-frequency field stimulation might even work synergistically with other approaches. For instance, high-frequency stimulation is sometimes used to directly activate motor circuits below the injury. You could potentially combine that for immediate function with this field treatment to encourage more lasting, beneficial changes in the spinal cord itself.
Okay, always important though. Let's talk limitations. Nuances. First off, these are rats. How does that affect translating this to humans?
That's a critical point. Rats, unlike humans, do have a greater natural capacity for spontaneous recovery after these types of injuries. Now, in a way that makes the comparison in the lab clearer, you can more easily see the added benefit of the stimulation on top of any natural recovery. But yes, it definitely means we can't just assume the same level of success or the same mechanisms will apply directly to humans. Translation is always a big step.
Were there other limitations noted in the study itself?
Yes, a couple of things. One was task specificity. While it significantly improved their walking and coordination on a flat surface, the treatment didn't seem to improve their performance on a more complex task, like walking across a horizontal ladder. So the recovery might be more geared towards certain types of motor control than others.
And what about the implant itself, the electrodes? Did they hold up over the 12 weeks?
They did observe that the impedance, basically the electrical resistance of the electrodes, increased over the 12 weeks in the rats. They remained functional, though. There was also some evidence of delamination, the electrode material separating slightly on some implants after they were removed. But importantly, lab bench testing showed the electrodes were stable during continuous electrical stimulation. So the researchers think the delamination seen after removal was likely due to the physical stress of taking the implant out, or maybe movement of the animal during the 12 weeks, rather than the electrical stimulation itself causing degradation. Still, durability for long-term human use is definitely something to keep working on.
Right. And the surgery itself. Subdural placement sounds more complex than epidural.
It is. Adapting this for larger animals and eventually humans will present challenges. Preventing leakage of cerebrospinal fluid, for example, is a bigger concern with subdural implants because you're opening that dura mater. It generally requires a more invasive surgical procedure. So the practicalities of making this a safe, routine procedure in humans need careful consideration.
Okay, so acknowledging those challenges, what's the path forward? Where does the research go next? Lucas Matter, the doctoral student on the paper, called it an exciting proof of concept.
Yeah, that sums it up well. The immediate next steps are really about optimization. They need to explore different doses of the treatment, what's the best electrical strength, the best frequency, how long should the treatment last each day, and for how many weeks or months. They need to find the most effective recipe, as they put it, for repair.
Trying to dial it in perfectly.
Exactly. And beyond that, more detailed investigation into how it works is needed. Using things like viral tracers to label specific nerve pathways originating from the brain, or advanced imaging techniques to get a better look at subtle changes in axons, even if there wasn't massive regrowth seen initially. They also mentioned needing more varied sensory tests to fully understand the recovery profile, including any potential impact on pain, which is a huge issue after spinal cord injury.
And the ultimate dream, I suppose, would be what, a permanent implant or something temporary?
Well, the long-term hope, the ideal scenario, would be if maybe several months of stimulation could trigger lasting beneficial effects, lasting changes in the spinal cord. If that were the case, perhaps the implant wouldn't need to be permanent. Maybe it could be removed after the key healing period. That would obviously be a massive advantage for patients.
What an incredible journey we've just covered. From, the almost hopeless situation of incurable spinal cord injury to this really tangible new hope through these bioelectric implants. It's such a neat combination of understanding the body's own basic electrical nature and then applying some really clever cutting-edge engineering.
It really is. It pushes back against that idea of incurability. It suggests that by learning to sort of speak the body's own electrical language more precisely, we might be able to unlock healing potential we didn't fully appreciate before.
So thinking about this, what does it all mean for you listening? Consider a future where we're not just treating symptoms, but potentially guiding regeneration using the body's own signals. What other horizons might open up as we get better at understanding and maybe even directing this intrinsic electrical language of our bodies? Really makes you wonder.
Thanks for tuning in to the Health Headliner podcast by To Digital. Like and subscribe for more health news and breakthroughs. Stay healthy and informed. See you next time.